it's two different things. There is logic, philosophy, and then there's godliness. Through tshuva mesiras nefesh, through repentance and mesiras nefesh, came the godly wonder Yeshua, the miracle of Hannukah. We go on now to the second column. Yom Tov Miyucha. The previous Rebbe says Hannukah is an exceptional Yom Tov. It is a Yom Tov of being victorious in war. Which from this we understand that the Nes of Hannukah is not only the miracle of the oil, which we commemorate for 8 days, but it was also a Nes of the war, because there were two factors in Hannukah. The first part was being victorious in the war. That took place on the 24th of Kislev. And the second part is the oil, which is that we commemorate from today and on, because of finding the pure pint of oil that was not touched, not contaminated, and this is the Nes of the 8 days of Hannukah. And actually, by Hannukah, we find that it is different than Purim. By Purim, there's a festive meal, there's a stress in eating, celebrating. By Hannukah, it's basically the Yom Tov of the candles. In a very simple way, when you think about it, a person puts together candles, oil, wicks, a menorah, or they make something into a menorah. The Imamish have it in minutes. They fulfill the mitzvah in the most enhanced way. And just adding every day an additional candle. So in a sense, Hannukah, the mitzvah of Hannukah, is in a very simplified way, that a person doesn't have to spend much money, doesn't have to put in so much exertion, and he's mekayim the mitzvah. The whole mitzvah is basically a spiritual mitzvah, the union of candles. Now we go on, the second paragraph on the second column. Hanes de Shemen, the miracle of Shemen. So the Tzemach Tzedek says in a Maimer, in a discourse, that this was the Nes of Hannukah, that they were spared from forgetting Torah. They were spared from forgetting godliness. Lahashkicham Teirasecha, they wanted them to forget that it's the Torah of Hashem. Shetimu kol hashmanim beheichel. This is reflected in the fact that they contaminated all the oil in the heichel, which is the chamber in the Beis Hamikdash. That's where the menorah stood. What is Shemen? Shemen shows on Chochmah, on Jewish philosophy. Pirush and Spashet os Chochmas Yevonis. Chochmas Yevonis circulated then. Spread Shemetam Chochmas HaKabbalah, how it is. It contaminates the traditional godly Chochmah philosophy. This is what was accomplished basically by them contaminating the oil in the Beis Hamikdash. The nature of oil is that it is basically a liquid that does not mix with any other liquids. It's Eila al Kol HaMashkin. It is elevates on all the different liquids. And that shows also when you get to philosophy that this is the godly philosophy, which there's nothing higher than that. There's different sorts of philosophies, different sorts of sciences. When it comes to the Shemen, that shows the godly philosophy, which is called Chochmah Elikis. And they contaminated it. And the point was, in a spiritual sense, that they actually touched and wanted to impact the godly philosophy and overcome in order that their philosophy and their point of philosophy is more than everything. Continuing, when they did find a pint of pure oil with the seal of the Kohen Gadol, which means that there was a Nes with an increase of Chochmah in Kedusha, because basically when we think about it, there is a challenge between two different philosophies. There's the Greek philosophy and Lahavdil, the sacred godly philosophy. In order that one should win over the other, there was a need for an extra dosage an extra drawdown from a higher level in order that one should overcome the enemy. Where was it from? So Chassidus explains in a very interesting way, it was by them finding that pint of oil which signified this and represented the seal of the Kohen Gadol. And the Kohen Gadol is a level of an attribute which is higher than Chokhmah. You had two Chokhmas challenging each other, the two philosophies. You needed, Chokhmah the Kedusha needed an extra strength and assistance from above in order to overcome the secular philosophy. How was it accomplished? It was accomplished because in the background there was already a pint of pure oil that the Kohen Gadol had a seal on it, and therefore this represents an attribute that's higher than Chokhmah, higher than philosophy, and that is how they were able to overcome their enemy. The Hannukah Shahoya Nes, the miracle was in the fact that there was an increase in the revelation of Chokhmah, of the sacred philosophy. And therefore, basically, the Nes was through the Shemen. This is a very big Chidush. Generally, they say the war was Rabbi biyad miyatim, many in the hands of few. That's how they were able to overcome it. Their enemies in war. But from here we understand that the background of everything was the pure oil that was found separately and it had the seal of the Kohen Gadol, and that gave them the spiritual strength and the physical strength in the war to overcome their enemy. And now we're going on to the next paragraph, which is the third paragraph on the left. In this paragraph, the Rebbe Rashab, in a Maimer, in a discourse in Tov Reish Ayin, that's late 1909, or who knows, maybe it could have been already 1910, Hannukah, the Rebbe Rashab is at a conference, more than one conference, very serious meetings about challenging the reforms that they wanted to do in Jewish schools. And this was a meeting that many Gedolei Yisrael, many Jewish leaders came, participated, as they arrived from many different cities, many known great figures at that time. Rebbe Rashab met with them, and Rebbe Rashab spent a lot of time there in Petersburg, in order to hammer out a solution and to object to these reforms. So the Hannukah Maimer reflects actually what was taking place then. Rabbi, when they would say a Maimer, it wasn't just a sermon like a Yom Gizul rabbi says, or any other rabbi says. It was basically accomplish something in the world. A Maimer meant drawing down a new revelation. We'll ask if everybody could put away the cell phones. We're now in the middle of Hannukah, so let's put it away. I also have a cell phone. I know when I have to speak, or I'm somewhere, I have to close the cell phone. So let's just be considerate for that. Hinu Yodua, it is known that Milchemes Yovan, the war with the Greeks, was a spiritual war. Sherotzu lashkichem teirosecha, they wanted them to forget your Torah, ulavirem, and to remove them mechukei ritzonecha, from the decrees of your will. V'hainu she'ozo yizgabrus ha'chochmas chitzenis b'yeseh. The secular philosophies strengthened themselves, and they were starting to overpower. Ad she'echshicho me'eda seirah kedusha, till they darkened the light of Kedusha. It says in regards to the exile of Yovan, the pasuk says, at the beginning of the creation, so the Medrash says each one of these words refers to a specific exile. The Cheshach goes on Yovan. Yovan was basically an exile that darkened, that's what the Medrash says, the eyes of the Jews with decrees. They're constantly issuing decrees, and that darkened the eyes of Yidden, suffering. They made a decree on Milah, not to make bris. They made a decree on Shabbos. They made a decree on Rish Chodesh. He made a decree not to learn Torah as it's connected with Hashem. Many decrees from that time. There was a decree in that time also not to have Kriyas HaTorah. And therefore they instituted then Haftarah instead of Kriyas HaTorah because they were not permitted to read in the Torah on Shabbos. It's time of Antiochus. What does it mean, darkening the light of Kedusha? That means contaminating the oils. The light of the Chochmah of Kedusha. They actually darkened it, they challenged it. Of the sacred traditional Torah that we have today, they challenged it. When the Chashmonoim overcame them with sacrifice, by sacrificing themselves, going to war with them, although they were a few against many. And through this they were victorious, which means they pushed away the evil. This is what they instituted, the Ner Hannukah. This is the light that pushes away the darkness. Which means to say, why do we have a Yom Tov of Hannukah? Because the whole war was about candles. And we commemorate the Yom Tov with candles, with light. Because the Yevonim were the ones that wanted to darken the eyes of the Jewish nation with decrees. So when we overcame them, we were basically victorious, and we then instituted the mitzvah of every year commemorating Hannukah with candles, with light. And then the Rebbe Rashab continues, therefore it is a mitzvah to place it from outside, the doorpost. Why? Because it's correcting the outside. What is the outside? The outside is referred to a public domain. When we say public, that is the opposite of one. The one is Hashem. When we say public, which means when a person goes out in the street and he sees a public, he sees many, so that is something that is exactly the opposite and contradicting that there's Hashem Echad. So therefore, the placing the candles at the doorpost is also illuminating the outside world and impacting the outside world with Achdus Hashem, with the oneness of Hashem. And the Rebbe Rashab says here a word which is actually a very big revelation in Chassidus, that it accomplishes, it has an impact to the extent that it also can change the Gimel Klipah Satmeas, which are the lowest of the negative energies that there are. Gimel Klipah Satmeas is the lowest level in spiritual sense of the energy that is in the world, because they are the ones that are mamish, the opposite of Torah, mitzvahs. To also elevate the spark that is in them and to push it away completely. And the interesting part, as mentioned, the Chidush is that in Tanya, as we know, this cannot be refined till the upcoming redemption. Gimel Klipah Satmeas cannot just be changed. When we eat something, when we drink something, when we use something for personal purpose, or we're using it for Torah mitzvahs, we are elevating the spark that's in it. But that's not Gimel Klipah Satmeas. That's called Klipah Nega. That's a neutral Klipah that has in itself good and evil. But when we're dealing with Gimel Klipah Satmeas, there's no Tev in there. There's no good in there. It's completely evil and connected with negative energy. And that cannot be elevated till the Gula. Here the Rebbe Rashab says that even that could be elevated. And this coincides what we mentioned earlier, that the Rebbe Rashab was finding himself then in a situation that he was dealing exactly with this concept, with Gimel Klipah Satmeas. The reforms that were going to take place in yeshivas and other decrees that potentially could have been happening was something that the Rebbe Rashab labeled as Gimel Klipah Satmeas in the way that he mentions it in the Maimer, and that also can be elevated because he was dealing with it to actually make sure that it doesn't take an effect. that the decrees do not take in effect. Is v'zeu atam, this is also the reason that the shiur, the Talmud tells us, what is the shiur, how long they should burn? It says the time that it takes for wood collectors, that they would go out in the early evening to collect wood for the fireplaces, and then they would come back home. So the Gemara says this is the shiur, this is the time slot that a person should be lighting the Hannukah licht. Hannukah candles are till the time that they go and they disappear then from the market, they come back home with their wood. They are called Talmudoi. Talmudoi happens to be also a nation of people that rebelled against Shlomo HaMelech in his time. The word Talmud has the letters Meredes, rebelling. So Chassidus explains on a deeper level, or in a personal level, in a spiritual sense, then when we say Talmudoi, it means at Kal Yirigel Talmudoi means till the end of the rebellion against Hashem. Kal means till they disappear, till the rebellion disappears. This is what Hannukah accomplishes. It accomplishes to challenge the negative energy and to overcome them. So that is Kal Yirigel Talmudoi, to remove those that are rebelling against Hashem. Removing, in a sense, not destroying them, but that they repent. Now we go on to page 2. Where does he place the menorah? He places on the left side of the door, right across the mezuzah. What is the reason for the left? Because in Kedusha and in everything there are two columns. There's the right, there's the left. The right shows on generosity. The right shows on giving from oneself, positive, and the left shows on limitation. Yeah.
I have a question. That's the reason why we have to, when we dress, the first side is the right. Same thing with the shoes.
With shoes, the same thing, but by shoes we tie the left shoe first.
First but we put first the right.
Right. Everything
But
is right.
the reason of that is because of.
Because basically the right is positive, and also because the right part of a person's body, for most people, I'm not going to talk about left-handed people, but basically for the right hand, the right side of the body is the most strength of the body. The hands also, until it's Yadayim, everything is from the right. We start always from the right, because that's the more energy, so we start a mitzvah with that. Every mitzvah we do with that.
And what happened with the people that...
The left, so they do with the left hand. Many different mitzvahs that they do with the left hand. Film they put on the right hand because we put it on the opposite hand, because that's where their energy, they put it on to the weaker hand. So by them, the right hand is the weaker hand.
And when we are about to, we say the bracha, we have to take with the right hand, or it's not?
Also, I mean, usually, I'm not talking about the left hand, I'm talking about generally, a person should take it in the right hand. When a person makes a bracha, he should hold it in his hand in the right hand. There was a story that Rabbi wanted very much. The Rabbi was very particular that when people would receive l'chaim from him, the Rebbe would wait till they extend the right hand. Wait till they extend the right hand. He would wait till they extend the Rebbe would give them l'chaim. He would wait till they extend their right hand. They should take l'chaim.
The one with the time,
Yeah. Should take it with the right hand. The Rebbe would wait. There was once that the Rebbe gave someone mashka, or wine. The person took it with the left hand. Tried to take it with the left. The Rebbe says, I'm giving you with the right hand, what are you giving me the left hand?
And the same with, in Haftarah?
Everything is the same. By Avdallah, we're talking about interchanging with something else, with the summit. But wherever the right hand is used, left is their way. But generally, the right hand is always the hand that should be used for brachas and etc. And it's interesting, there was once a child that came to the Rebbe for Kedusha Bracha. The Rebbe was his father, I think his mama's an infant. And the father extended the left hand. And the Rebbe asked, what happened with the right hand? He says, he's a lefty.
Oh.
And the Rebbe insisted, the right hand. Gave the Rebbe, the Rebbe gave him in the right hand, and the end was the child started to use the right hand. The right hand became the primary. This was a Pella, but this was like Kedusha Bracha. Usually the Rebbe would give those that extended the left hand as a left hand, but because they're lefties. But here, this was an exception. Okay, so now we go further. So, and the left side is basically the minimum. It's generally by most of the people, it's the weaker hand. That's what it's called, Yad Keyo. So therefore, the Rebbe Rashab says, since the right one is the stronger one, that also shows that in Kedusha, in sacred matters, it is the stronger power, has stronger energy. Sacred has stronger energy. Therefore, Klipah, negative energy cannot draw from there. Where could they draw from? When there is a minimum of revelation. That is where they can smuggle in and try to grab something. In the same sense that we say a king has a big meal, a festive meal, and then there's the leftover. This is where, for example, the bones are given to the dogs. So the same thing also in Klipah, in Kedusha and Klipah, in negative energy. The negative energy is just nibbling off what's left from Kedusha, the minimum of energy of Kedusha. But to get a greater measure of sustenance, energy, they need to be a vessel for it. If they're not an appropriate vessel for it, they cannot receive from there. So they just come from behind trying to schlep something out. It's called Hannukah. They're like schlepping from Kedusha. So therefore the left side is more preferred for them because this is where they can smuggle in without any without being monitored and receive the energy that sustains them. So therefore, when it comes to Hannukah, we correct the left side by placing the Hannukah licht on the left doorpost, at the left doorpost. Now we go on to another inyan, which is in the days of Hannukah. After Yutas Kislev, 2 years later, the Alter Rebbe was arrested again. And he was freed, this was 2 years later, on Hannukah. There was a certain difference in opinion when that took place. When was he freed? So, in the paragraph, we see it over here, in the second paragraph on the second page. The Halshana, the libel, was then on Teres Achsidis. The first redemption was connected with the rest of the Alter Rebbe on him personally. The second libel was on the teachings of Chassidus. And the Snagdus, the opposition was very great, very strong. And in the third, on the fifth lichtul, he was liberated. How could it be both? Basically, there was a difference in opinion between even members of the Alter Rebbe's family, sons of the Alter Rebbe. They were discussing what took place on the fifth lichtul, which is basically the fifth candle of Hannukah. One of the sons says the Alter Rebbe went out of prison then, second time. Another son said, no, the Chassidim that were with the Alter Rebbe in jail, they were freed on the fifth, but the Alter Rebbe went out on the third. The Rebbe was once asked, what do we do with this contradiction? So the Rebbe answers, and this is in quote here, Bishneyam Gimel Vehei, in both days there were days of redemption Gam Kipshuta, which means, and one way of explaining it is, that he was given permission to leave on the third, and it was processed on the fifth. This could be one way of explaining it. So basically, although in the later years the Rebbe always stressed more the fifth lichtul than the third lichtul, it was more inclined that it was the fifth lichtul, the Geula of the Alter Rebbe. One of the facts is also that Chassidim, would make weddings after on the fifth lichtul. Even the first one, my parents' wedding, on the fifth lichtul, was mamish the first year of the Rebbe's Nesius, 1951. And it was definitely pashtus from the Rebbe's suggestion, the fifth lichtul. The Rebbe would give Hannukah geld, the Rebbe would speak a sicha for the Bacharim, for the students. Now we go on to the last days of Hannukah. The last day of Hannukah is referred to as Zeis Hannukah. The reason for that is because the reading of the Torah on that day is Zeis Hannukah HaMizbeach. That is why it's called Zeis Hannukah. According to Chassidus, what do the 7 days signify on the 8th day? The 7 days are the 7 midas, the 7 attributes, and Zeis Hannukah is the attribute of Malchus, royalty. The second explanation is exactly the opposite. The 8 days are basically, there is Keser, the first attribute is Keser, the crown, and then there's the 7 attributes that follow. Okay, going on now to Metzoi Hannukah. The Aveda of Metzoi Zeis Hannukah has to be the yearning for the days of Hannukah. A person leaves Hannukah, they should have a yearning because the neshama receives benefits from a godly revelation that is internalized in the neshama of every yid when it comes to Hannukah. In Pelish Sfarim it's mentioned, actually also in Chassidus, Chabad, that the Hannukah is a reflection of the upcoming redemption. Because in the same sense that the upcoming redemption, there will be the harp in the Beis Hamikdash will be of 8 strings, not 7 strings. In the same sense, Hannukah is 8 candles, not 7, as it was traditionally in the Beis Hamikdash. So therefore, Hannukah reflects the upcoming redemption. Now we go on to 4 different lessons that we derive from Hannukah. One lesson is on the bottom of the right column. It is known, the word, and the Pisgam and the Heroa of Nesiderin of the previous Rebbe, and darf sich zuhören, was die Lichtlich erzählen. One needs to listen what is the message of the candles, what the candles are relating. The Chaim move on, the Rebbe says it's understood that because a person could learn a lesson of something new every day, this is something which is very positive, which means a person learns the Shir Chumash every day, Tilim, Tanya, the reading of the Torah, every day there's a new lesson. In the same sense that a person learns a lesson from the candles, hearing the messages from the candles. Going on to the second column, Mishatishka Hachama. Hannukah licht are different than Shabbos licht. Shabbos licht we cannot light after sunset. Hannukah licht we light in particular after sunset, which means when it became dark outside. This teaches us we should not become overwhelmed from the darkness that is outside, in the outside world. We shouldn't give up. A person should strengthen themselves with a strong bitachon in Hashem, who is Etzem Atev. They should strengthen themselves in Hashem, in feeling secure that the Eibishter will give what he gives. So who Etzem Atev, because he's the essence of goodness. The Rebbe says this is the lesson that we derive, that by lighting the Ner Hannukah, dafka in a time when it's dark, that we see also with our flesh eyes, that a little light of Torah mitzvahs dispels much darkness, surely if there is a lot of light. And as the Rebbe once mentioned in a Sikha, although it's not a word from Chassidus Chabad, but it's a word which is in Pelish Sfarim, mentioned it once. There is a controversy in Gemara. If a person found something that was lost, and he figures that the owner probably gave up on it, so that is when he's permitted to take it already for himself. So it's called in Gemara, in the phrase that the Talmud speaks about it, it's referred to as Yush Shalei Medas. Yush, that he gave up on it, but we don't know he gave up on it. It's just that we're assuming, or do we assume that he given up on it? So there's a controversy of two sages, very famous sages in Gemara. One is called Abaya, and one is Rabbi. They were counterparts actually, and there were many controversies amongst them in understanding concepts in the Mishnah, etc. The Mela, it's called Yush Shalei Medas. Yush, without the knowledge of the person, do we figure, they say, even if the person does not know he lost it, well, we assume if he would have known, he would have given up. Because it was such a remote place or in a remote setting, we would figure that we're permitted to take it. So there's a Polish word that says, Yush, breaks it down into two phrases. Yush, if a person gives up, general, Shalei Medas, it's not logical. Which means a person should never give up. The lesson that we're discussing now, that a person is always connected with Hashem, he should never give up, he should always have bitachon. So this is from that Talmud, the phrase, the concept, Yush Shalei Medas, which means in regards to a person that lost something and we assume, or we don't assume that he would give up. So there is also, we derive from it a general lesson that if a person bechlal gives up, Yush, it's Shalei Medas. It's not based on knowledge. It's not based on logic. A third lesson that we derive from Hannukah is that we posted the Meneda at the doorpost. Which this means that the light should also be to the outside. And that teaches us that it's not sufficient that in the house it is illuminated and warm with Neir Mitzvah V'Teira Eir, but we also have to exert ourselves to make sure to illuminate the street and also the environment around us. This is basically the lesson of placing it at the doorpost. And this is actually a lesson for the whole year, as well as the earlier lessons, and not just for Hannukah, but Hannukah teaches us for the whole year. And finally, the fourth lesson is Meiseh V'Helach, adding a candle every night. This teaches us that in the Aveda, in this work of strengthening and spreading Torah and Judaism, it needs to be in a way of blossoming. The person should never be satisfied with what they did the earlier day, but constantly strive, accelerate to a higher standard. And in addition to that, also in that first level, which means in the first step of his Aveda, he already has the potential for what follows later. Which actually, when we see what the Rebbe wrote here, there is an interesting concept that we derive from here. The Rebbe is actually hinting to a controversy that is taking place between Beis Hillel and Beis Shammai. How many candles are lit the first night? Beis Hillel says the first night is 1 and we go up. Beis Shammai says 8 and we go down. What is the logic of their opinion? The logic is simple. Beis Shammai goes according to potential. Potential, the first night has all the 8 nights. So therefore, potentially, because of the 8 included in the potential, we light 8. And every day it is minimized. Every evening, and there's 1 less. The last night is 1 candle. On the other hand, when it comes to Beis Hillel, it goes according to, in a practical sense, not in Keach, but in Peyo. What actually is happening? How did we see the miracle unfold? Every night we saw more and more. So therefore, every night we commemorate and we add a candle. So therefore, a candle is added every night. Now, when we look at this paragraph, it's very interesting how the Rebbe incorporates and consolidates them together as one. On one hand, we add a candle every night, which this is the opinion of Beis Hillel. And then the Rebbe adds in the last line and a half that already in the first step we have the potential for what follows. The Rebbe is not telling us that we should light 8 in the first night, because that's not the halacha. But in a spiritual sense, we can use that concept in our Aveda, that potentially we have that already in the first night. Although in a practical sense, we light 1 candle every night. But the Rebbe is incorporating them together, that on one hand we have the addition, in practical sense, lighting 1 candle, and we should also know that potentially we have it in the first night. And now we go on to the Hannukah of Rabbi Seinu Nisienu. What was the custom by the Rabbeim? They would light candles by a door, not by a window, and they would light it from inside. The Rabbeim would light Hannukah candles in the presence of the family members, and only in the presence of family members. If there are other people there, they would wait in a very subtle way till everybody left, and then they would light candles. The Rebbe explains that since, on one hand, it's done by the doorpost, each one in their house, so therefore it's not mamash a pirsum, like an inyan of the Megillah, Purim, etc. The Rebbe still remains with a question, but the Rebbe explains it in later years, Al Pichsidus, that the difference between Purim and Hannukah is Purim is wine, Hannukah is oil. By wine, there's inyan of revelation. The person drinks wine, nichnas yayin yotzasod. When it comes to oil, it's an acquired tone. And therefore, this one is more commotion, the positive sense, and this is less. Okay. Yeah.
I'm sorry, what was that again? The oil is what?
It's an quieter sense. It doesn't do
It doesn't
the
reveal.
effect that wine does. Wine basically reveals. Okay, the last paragraph on the second page. After lighting candles, the Rebbe Rashab would sit down and learn Teda, Samach L'Neiras HaChanukah, right near the candles. And of course, he did not use the light of the candles for reading, as we're not supposed to use the light of the candles for reading. They have only their own, since they're sacred, is as we say in Neiras Halalu, Ein Lanu Rishus Lishtamish Ben, that we can't use them. So he had additional light, but he sat down and learned right near the candles, as the Rebbe once explained, that this is the pasuk, the verse, Ner Mitzvah V'Teireh, from candles we come to Teda. So immediately, right after kindling the Menorah, he would sit down and learn. Going on to page 3. Okay, there's extra copies here. People that came in, there's copies. Yeah, okay. Latkes Ovent. Latkes Ovent means Latkes evening. It was customary by the Tzemach Tzedek that one of the nights of Hannukah he would make sort of a fabrengen with family members, and they referred to it as a Latkes Ovent. The same took place likewise by the Alter Rebbe and the Mittel Rebbe, that they would have a family gathering once during Hannukah and spend time together. To make Hannukah Geld, giving Hannukah Geld. Rebbe Rashab would give Hannukah Geld either the 4th or the 5th candle. The Rebbe would customarily give Hannukah Geld the 5th candle, a silver dollar, to all the Talmidim, the students that learned in 770, in the yeshiva in 770. In the year late 1990, in Tafshin Nun Aleph, the Rebbe distributed Hannukah Geld to men, women, and children. It was a paper dollar and it was a silver dollar in a case that everyone received from the Rebbe. The Rebbe was in shul, the big shul, and the lines formed from outside, and people would receive, every individual received a Hannukah Geld from the Rebbe. Heiros from the Rebbe. Now we go on to the directives, what the Rebbe instructed us for the days of Hannukah. The first thing is, Mivtza Hannukah, to make sure that as many Yidden, as many Jews that we can accomplish, that they should have their own menorah and they should light their own Hannukah menorah. So B'meila, this is to be mezakeh, to give the merit to many Yidden, to all Yidden, that they should have a Chanukiah to fulfill the mitzvah of Ner Hannukah Mahadrim Mina Mahadrim. Mahadrim Mina Mahadrim means, in an enhanced way, that they light their own, and every night they add one. So this is called Mahadrim Mina Mahadrim. Kidai v'nochen, it is worthy and appropriate that at the entrance of the children's room, children should light their own menorah, and this all contributes to their chinuch. And the Rabbi says, surely this should be under the supervision of the parents, but it should be at their room in order to train them, to enhance them with the mitzvah of Levis Chanukah. Limud Hilches Drushe Chassidus. To learn the halachas, the Rebbe says, out of Chanukah is the appropriate time and day to study the halachas, the laws of Chanukah, and the Hasidic discourses explaining Chanukah. So the Rebbe would urge that before Chanukah. The May Chanukah. Now the Rebbe gives the instruction what should be in regards to giving Chanukah geld. The Rebbe says there is a inyan to be me'erer, the minhag, the custom by Jews to give Chanukah geld, to fulfill this custom at least twice during Chanukah. The Rebbe continues on the next column, Umatev, and better yet every day, Ube suffer with an increase on the fifth lichbul, as it is also stressed in particular in the Jewish custom that the fifth lichbul people add in the giving of Chanukah geld to sons and daughters, young children and adults, and the same thing also in regards to the first and eighth lichbul. So it comes out from the Rabbi every day, but there should be an increase in the first, fifth, and eighth candle. Kedai, that a meistes chinuch in institutions, in schools, children should be brought together during the Chanukah days at least once, and to give each one Chanukah geld, and to explain to them that that is their personal allowance, their personal property that is given to them. To learn the Maimer in Zeis Chanukah, the Maimer Baruch She'asa Nisim. This is a Maimer that the Alter Rebbe said, delivered a year after he was freed from prison. It begins Baruch She'asa Nisim Laveseinu Bayomim Maheim Bizman Hazeh. And when the Alter Rebbe began the Maimer, he began in an interesting way. He said Baruch She'asa Nisim Laveseinu, that he made Nisim, he did miracles for our ancestors. I mean, that's what it means in English. Laveseinu, so the Alter Rebbe right away said to the Baal Shem Tev and the Mezritcha Magid, Bayomim Maheim Chanukah Purim Bizman Hazeh Yutas Kislev. That's the way he began the Maimer. Maimer was an interesting Maimer in the sense also that it was a timely reason why he said that Maimer. Because it was after the Alter Rebbe was freed from prison, Chassidic Chabad were very emotional and excited. They would go out in the fields and daven and scream. It seemed like they became Karliner Chassidim. In a sense, they started to take the trade of Karliner, which screamed by davening. And the Alter Rebbe was not for that. So the Alter Rebbe in this Maimer brings out the uniqueness of the mind over the heart. Mind, intellect over emotions. And as the Frierdiker Rebbe says, that after Yutas Kislev they were hanging in the air, between heaven and earth. And the Alter Rebbe with this Maimer brought them back to earth. So this is a historic Maimer in this sense. And to conclude with, in regards to the upcoming redemption, if all the Yom Tevim will cease to exist, doesn't mean they'll literally cease to exist because they are mitzvahs. Yeah, Pesach, Shavuot, Sukkot are mitzvahs from Torah. It is just that they will not stand out in comparison to the revelation that will take place then. It'll be like a candle in daylight. But Chanukah and Purim will always stand out significantly, even in the upcoming redemption, because it is based on Mesiras Nefesh, on self-sacrifice. That is why it'll remain eternal. Any questions? Okay. Chanukah,
Question is,
Yeah.
Like we give each other also Hannukah gifts.
The what?
But we don't have family here.
So
when
the Rebbe
we
said
give
that
each
friends should give each other. There was a
And
sikha
that's-
about that in the friends, yeah.
Thank you very much.